Hello, I'm Amanda Videl, your host for another oral history interview brought to you by the Jacksonville Broadcasters Association. JBA's mission is to preserve the rich history of Northeast Florida's radio, television, and broadcasting industries, and to honor the contributions of many broadcasting legends who came before us. The association is open to any past or present broadcaster, as well as those affiliated with the industry who have served this region's proud broadcasting heritage. We also welcome students who are focused on pursuing a career in the broadcasting industry. You are our future. Today is August 31st, 2022, and I am proud to welcome our guest, Lorena Inclan, former reporter and anchor for CBS47 and Fox 30 Action News Jax. Welcome, Lorena.
Thank you for having me, Amanda. It's great to be here.
It's great to have you. You have served in the broadcasting industry for a number of years, but you recently transitioned out of television into a new role. Let's start there and set the stage for our viewers today. Tell us what you're up to today.
Absolutely. So yes, about a year ago, a little more than a year ago, I transitioned to a role in government for the public affairs arena, I guess you could say, for government, which I know you're very familiar as well. We kind of have a similar story in that sense. And so I've been there now a little over a year. I work for St. Johns County now. I'm the Director of Public Affairs.
Awesome. And your daily work is to communicate with the public about affairs in St. Johns County?
That's correct. And I also work closely with local media, so it's something it's right in my wheelhouse, and I still love communicating with the friends that I made along the way in media. So it was a good transition. It just made sense, and I'm enjoying it so far.
So talk about why it made sense. What were you doing in Jacksonville prior to taking on that role?
So when I got to Jacksonville in November 2012, which feels like a lifetime ago now, I went straight to Action News Jax, started out as a reporter, and then I was there for about 8.5 years. The last 3 years I was the weekend morning anchor, and during the week I was reporting, and then I also did some fill-in anchoring during the week. And that's what what brought me to Jacksonville was my husband, because he is living here at the time, and has businesses in the area, and so that's the reason why I came here, and then landed a job at Action News Jax and was there 8.5 years.
8.5 years is a long history. And full disclosure for our viewers today, Lorena and I work together at Action News Jax, so we're very excited to be catching up on that part of our lives as well. Before we get into detail about all of that, I want to go back to the very beginning though. Tell us where you're from, where you grew up, a little bit about your history and your culture and family.
Absolutely. So I grew up in Miami, Florida. My family still lives there today. Grew up in a Cuban household. I'm a first-generation American. I was born here. My older brother was born in Cuba, so really immersed in the Cuban culture. And I always tell people when they ask me where I'm from, I always say Miami, and then when they ask me about my heritage, I always say Cuban-American. I can't leave one without, I'm both,
Sure.
And I recently heard this podcast about living in the hyphen that talks about, the two cultures that a lot of people grow up in, and I definitely feel like I'm living in that hyphen because I'm both Cuban and I'm American. So that really defines my identity, kind of the lens with which I see the world, my lived experience growing up in an immigrant household and experiencing, bringing our family over from Cuba and all the turmoil happening in that country, even still to today. And just really witnessing all the hard work that my family put in to make a living and give me and my brother a good future here in the United States.
What were some of the stories that they told you growing up that really had an impact on you? Anything specific that they ingrained in you?
Absolutely. Well, it was stories, but it was also things that I lived.
Okay.
Because when my parents came to the United States, like in the 80s, they were the first people in their family to leave Cuba. So it was up to them to really, establish themselves in the United States and then really help bring our other family out of Cuba, because it just was not a livable place. You really couldn't. It was difficult politically, but also economically. We supported a lot of our family in Cuba during that time, and then when we were able to bring them over, we jumped at that opportunity. So I grew up going to the airport to receive my family members who were arriving from Cuba.
Wow.
And I distinctly remember the entire family being at the airport to receive my aunts, my cousins, my uncles, and sometimes it would be years before we actually saw them. So, and my grandmother too, my grandfather. So those airport reunions really marked my childhood. And I also remember one of my uncles who we weren't able to, because of different circumstances, we weren't able to bring him through claiming him as a family member, so he came on a raft.
Wow.
And I remember going to this place in Miami to look at these this was in the 90s, it was a really big exodus of Cuban refugees during that time. My uncle was one of them. And we knew that he was going to leave on a raft because the situation was desperate during that time. I mean, they were going hungry. It was really bad, and it was a desperate situation. So we knew he was going to leave. He got word to us that he was going to do that. I remember my grandmother praying the rosary in the house, and just even talking about it still gives me goosebumps because we stayed up all night that day that we learned that he was going to take the Florida Straits with 5 other men.
Wow.
And we went to this building. I remember I was like 6 years old or something like that, and we went to this building and there was a really long list of names, and we were looking for my uncle's name, and if you were on that list, that meant that you made it to, or that you got caught by the Coast Guard and you were sent to Guantanamo Bay. And we went a couple times, couldn't find his name. Finally, we learned that he was picked up by the Coast Guard, spent a year in Guantanamo Bay, and then the reunion happened after that.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
So it was, yeah, and then of course I always heard stories from my grandparents and my parents as well, and what it was like to live in Cuba after the revolution, and how difficult things became, and just, you know, it really made me appreciate what my parents did to bring us here, and just being able to grow up in a free country.
Did that play into your decision to pursue this career at all?
Yes, absolutely. When I think about why I had so much of an interest in journalism, because I'm first generation American, and I grew up in a family where my parents to this day struggle with the English language. So I had to grow up pretty quickly in the sense that I was my family's translator. Anytime something came into our home in terms of paperwork, insurance paperwork, or you know, whatever the case was, my parents would always ask me, Lorena, can you please read this, please translate it for us? And I didn't know it at the time, but I was reporting.
Yeah,
you know,
true.
At that time.
Yes.
Right? Like I was receiving this information, translating it for my parents to inform them, which is what we do as journalists.
Interesting.
And that I just always had this passion for watching the news, making sure that I was informed, to really help my family be informed too, because you know, it really, I saw them struggle over the lack of information that they had, and because of the language barrier. And it was really important for me to make sure that I was there for them, to make sure that they knew what was going on. And you know, I guess that's a different experience for a lot of kids. You know, a lot of kids probably are not their family's translators, but
I would say a lot of them probably are these days too.
That's true.
With,
That's
with
true.
so many different cultures within the American culture as well. So
Absolutely.
Interesting perspective there. So when did you decide to pursue journalism, and where did you do that?
So I decided to, I really, after I graduated from high school, towards my senior year there, I was like, okay, I really need to get serious of what I want to study. And because I was really into dance, I was in a dance team, and I thought I was going to be this famous ballerina one day. And when my mom was like, nope, you got to study first. So really got serious about that, and I realized journalism was the only thing that I was really interested in.
Okay.
So my senior year, I decided, okay, I'm going to study broadcast journalism. This is what I love to do, and I was already, I mean, being a dancer, being on stage, being in front of people was always like, you know, I didn't really get nervous or anything like that. So I'm like, okay, I can speak in front of a camera. I can do that.
Yeah.
We suited up with a life vest, goggles, and a not so comfortable helmet. An hour and a half later, we landed aboard the Truman, somewhere along the East Coast. That's when the real fun began.
So, which is a little different than being on stage versus a camera.
It
but, you know, but I kind of correlated those two. But so I went to the University of Miami, and I went to their School of Communication there, and that's where I really just the more I got into my major, the more I loved it.
Nice.
And I also did the
Was it
Spanish.
a broadcasting track?
It was broadcast journalism track.
Okay.
And it was a double major. You had to be a double major, so I picked international studies as my double major.
Okay.
And I did the Spanish language newscast too on campus, and kind of did both English and Spanish. And
Gotcha.
So that started.
Okay. And then where did you head after you graduated?
After I graduated, so I graduated in the middle of a recession.
And did you have an internship too? I want to make sure I don't skip over that part. Okay.
Yes, I did. Yes, I interned at the NBC affiliate and Telemundo affiliate in Miami.
Okay.
WTVJ. NBC6 in Miami. That's where I interned, and then after I graduated, I got a job there as a camera operator and floor director.
Okay.
Journalism students know what that means, but for those who don't know the lingo, I was on set making sure the talent knew where to look and what camera it was.
Yeah.
So I did that part-time. So I graduated in a recession, so it was really difficult to find full-time work.
Sure.
And it took me about 8 months after I graduated to land my first on-air job.
Did you ever doubt the process in that 8 months?
I did a little bit. I got a little discouraged there towards the end. I didn't give up. I kept applying, but it was discouraging to, I really wanted to land that first on-air job. I knew I had to go to a small town.
Yeah.
They definitely drilled that into us that to start in this business, you have to go to a small town. So I went to Amarillo, Texas, is where I started.
Okay.
I didn't know a soul.
Wow.
It was an interesting experience.
And you went there as a reporter?
I went there as a reporter.
What was your first day like reporting there?
Oh my gosh, I was so nervous. And my first live shot, I still had it. I watched it the other day, coincidentally. I was a nervous wreck. And I was just talking so fast. Do you remember your first live shot?
I still talk fast, unfortunately, but yes, I was talking very fast back then. Sure.
I'm like, I don't know how people understood what I was saying. Yes, and it was cool. I started off in the Spanish side because it was a duopoly. It was a Telemundo and CBS
So it was a natural fit in that way, though.
It was.
Okay.
It was perfect. And I really wanted to do Spanish language news. I wanted my parents to understand what I was reporting.
Yes.
But then I naturally kind of went into English. I did both. And then after that, I went to Orlando and I did only Spanish for Univision Orlando.
Okay.
And then I came to Jacksonville where I transitioned to the English side.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
What did you take away from the Orlando station that still sticks with you now?
I was a multimedia journalist, is what they called it at the time. I think now they call it multi-skilled journalist or something like that.
Yeah.
But I had to learn how to be very self-sufficient and had to shoot to edit. Which we hear that in the business too, like don't get any extra stuff that you're not going to use.
Yeah.
Shoot the video that you need because you're on a deadline and you're the only one that's here. You're the reporter, you're the editor, you're the photographer. And so I learned how to edit pretty quickly and just go straight to the point, which is helpful because you need to be concise also when they only give you a minute. So.
And we kind of grew up in the industry at the same time. That concept of MMJ was pretty new at the time, and we were kind of forging our way through it. Did you ever feel uncomfortable in that area?
Yes, at first. I was not used to being on my own, because in Amarillo, I had a photographer. I had to edit my own stories, but I had a photographer.
Okay.
So it was kind of a hybrid situation there. In Orlando, it was all me. And so that was hard at first, but then I got into a groove, and I don't know if you experienced that too. It's just kind of just
yeah,
yeah,
absolutely.
And then you almost kind of appreciate that you're the creative director of your piece.
Yes, absolutely. I think I appreciate it, and then I also appreciated when I had the help.
Yes,
having that help so much more. I mean, it taught me just a totally different respect for other areas in which I hadn't worked before.
That is so true.
Yeah,
absolutely. In Jacksonville, I mean, we had photographers, and it's so helpful to be able to just focus on your story, the writing, the presentation, making sure that you look at it. At the end of the day, it's a visual medium, so you have to make sure you look presentable.
Sure.
When I was in MMJ, that was kind of always on the back burner, and it was just like, whew, little lipstick, brush your hair, good to go.
Sure.
But yeah, it was a great experience. I took away a lot from it.
So coming to Jacksonville, what brought you to Action News Jax specifically?
I had applied to Action News Jax before I got the job in Orlando, and I didn't get the position.
Interesting.
And so I went to Orlando.
Did they give you any feedback on that?
Let me think. They told me I was too green.
Okay.
Yeah, it was something like that. And I
needed more time.
I think I was. I definitely that was accurate. So I went to Orlando. I got some more experience.
Okay.
Brushed up on my reel and applied again. And the second time I got the position.
Was your reel dual language?
It was. It had a little bit of Spanish in there. It was mostly English. But, that's a good question too, because I remember I knew I wanted to transition into English. And I went, after I did my story in Spanish, I would do the same exact story in English. So I had some long days there working on my reel.
Yes.
And making sure that I was getting the content I needed. So it was a lot of work to put it together.
And you found the position at Action News Jax. Did you ever have an agent?
I did not have an agent. Yeah.
Did
I had agents reach out.
Sure.
They would find my reel and they would reach out, and I did speak to a few agents, but all the positions that I've landed on my own. So I felt like I didn't need one. So I saved that money.
Yeah. Okay. Now you came into Jacksonville as a reporter, and the position really developed over the years that we were there. At least I remember it developing, where we were really just focusing on, the television product, but we started to have a lot more influence of social media on our positions. Tell me what that was like for you and your perspective on that end.
Well, Amanda, as you know, we were pretty swamped with work. I mean, when we were out in the field, we had a lot on our plate, and we had to mostly do, and I think to this day it's still how it is, you have to do 2 stories a day. A lot of times it's 2 completely separate stories a day, especially for my shift, which was the dayside shift. And sometimes it was 2 different stories a day in completely different parts of town.
Yes.
So just gathering the material that you need for your TV story is a lot of work. So putting another layer on top of that for social media, which I think is extremely important. I think it's one of those mediums that is here to stay, and we definitely need to put content on there. But it was a lot of work, and to get that workflow going and making sure that you're thinking about, okay, what are you going to put on social media? How are you going to tease this? What ended up happening a lot of times is you were so focused on getting your sound, your video, transcribing it, writing it, that social media was kind of like the last thing you did, which if I could do it over again, I would go back and put social media first, because you have so many people that you can reach on social media. And back then it was just, you can't miss slot. There's a deadline, and you got to have that package ready. So that was the priority. But now I think it's shifting.
How did you manage your day then? Did you ever get into a groove where you finally felt more comfortable with it?
I knew that, so 2 o'clock was my cutoff time.
Okay.
Like, I always tried to have all my video and all my sound in my hand by 2 o'clock.
Okay.
Because I tried to give myself between 2 and 3 to log, and then from 3 to 4, like 3 to 3:45 to write. I hated rushing to write something. I really wanted to make sure that I had everything that I needed. Sometimes I didn't get the luxury of 45 minutes to write a package, but that's always what I tried to sort of back time. If I'm live at 5, better have everything by 2, and then I backtrack from there.
And then you also had to consider other people's schedules as well, your photographer, the producers, all of that. It really is managing a project, and I don't think people realize that. You're not just the face of the story, you are putting it all together.
You said it perfectly. That's exactly right. And that's kind of, journalists do so much, which is why our skills can translate to so many different positions. And that's why, like I said earlier, I think it was a good fit to transition to this public affairs role, because we do a lot of project management. We know how to meet deadlines. We're strong communicators. We have so many skills that we can use, and it's such a valuable asset to any company, any position. I don't care what the job is. If you have a strong communicator, that's an asset to your team. And
I think, for me, I know that every position I've ever held in this industry plays a role in what I'm doing today. From being the floor director to a writer to every position. There's no position that was too small that doesn't play a role in what I'm doing today. Do you have advice for students who are kind of trying to find their niche and might be saying, this isn't a role that I want to do forever? Anything that you can share with them and encourage them in that way?
I would say never be too big for the little jobs. You can never just be like, oh, that's I don't want to do that. I want to do this big thing, or I want to be the star, I want to be this and that. Because every opportunity that I've gotten has really been, creating those relationships with those quote unquote, what people might call those small jobs. And when you create those relationships, people see that, you're hungry and you can do that project that may be relatively easy, then you work your way up from there. But never be too big for those small jobs, because you can definitely meet someone that can help elevate you to your next position that's bigger and better.
Not only learn a skill, but meet some new contacts as well. Yeah, absolutely. So in your role as a reporter, you also were very active in the community. Tell me a little bit about some of the things that you're most proud of that you did in that role.
That's one of the things that people ask me all the time if I miss news, and one of the things I miss is interacting with the community on a daily basis. I do that in my role now, but not as much as I did when I was a reporter. You were literally out in neighborhoods speaking to people, and I do miss that. And through doing that, I got to meet great people who run great nonprofits even. I sit on the board of one of those nonprofits today, Project Cold Case. I met Ryan Backman, the founder, when I was, and you know him as well.
I do, absolutely. Yes. He does some great work in our community.
Yes, absolutely great work. And I met him through a story that I was doing about his father and cold cases in the area. and I just really became really interested in the work that he's doing, and I just wanted to shine a light a little more. He asked me to be on the board, and I absolutely was so honored that he asked me, and I'm still on the board today. And that I wouldn't have met him if it wasn't for my reporting job in Jacksonville.
Yeah, that's great. Your husband and you all are both involved in Cuban culture here in Jacksonville as well. Talk about what your impression was of the Cuban culture here and what you all have done to really help bridge communication with that group.
Well, when I got here, I was like, where is the Cuban culture?
That's right. Well, we're not that far from Miami, you know,
right.
Yeah, we're really
true.
not that far from a huge group. And then you come to North Florida, and it's a lot different.
It's very different. In 2012, it was very different. I felt like I was, you know, there weren't a lot of, at least that I saw in the community, there weren't a lot of Latinos. That has completely changed. You go out now, and it's very common for you to hear a couple or a family speaking Spanish anywhere you go.
Sure.
When I was here in 2012, that was not the case, and it's so great to see that diversity come here to Jacksonville.
Sure.
Because you're seeing Latin restaurants and other different cultures too pop up everywhere, different businesses, and now I'm seeing that grow a little bit too. As you know, my husband has a Cuban restaurant in town.
Yes.
So thankfully I didn't miss the Cuban food because I had it at the restaurant, so, because I really need my croquetas and my pastelitos. But it's great to see other Cuban restaurants popping up now too.
Yeah.
And I love that. I really love seeing people bring their culture to Jacksonville, because I think, you know, it's already here. It's just now it's more visible, I think. I love that.
And you were able to bring it to light as a reporter. What were were there any specific stories in our local area that you were most proud of in that arena?
About the Hispanic community?
Yes.
You know, before I left, I worked on 3 or 4 different stories for Hispanic Heritage Month, which is coming up soon. And I interviewed a local brain surgeon that came over from Mexico, had nothing to his name, came over illegally, he didn't have any papers. He worked his way up to now become one of the most world-renowned brain surgeons in the country. And he works here at Mayo. He's still Dr. Quiñones, an incredible mind. And I interviewed him. I did a one-on-one interview with him about his journey, and he talked about all the mentors along the way who helped him. I also interviewed a local artist, a Puerto Rican artist, who is just, you know, leaving her mark about her culture through her artwork. And another gentleman who talked to us about Afro-Latino culture, which a lot of people don't know much about, because Latinos come in all shapes, colors, sizes. And you know, it was really cool to talk to him about his heritage, being an Afro-Latino from Puerto Rico, and that was really cool. So really enjoyed all of that.
That's wonderful. You interviewed my boss at the time as well,
and
in law enforcement as well.
Yes. Oh my gosh, yes.
We worked together on that project. I almost let that one slip from my mind.
That's right, and it was so cool to learn about her career coming up and trailblazing as a woman in the FBI. That was part of that project as well. So yeah, that was really cool.
That's great. Yeah. That's great. When you came to Jacksonville, what did Latin broadcasting look like in this market?
You know, when I came here, I know that there were some publications in town that focus on Spanish language news. Hola Noticias is one of them that I can recall, but there really was not, that I know of, an avenue for the Spanish-speaking population of Jacksonville to obtain information. And there's a huge void there. Still to this day, I think it's getting better. Recently, Action News Jax announced that they have a partnership with Telemundo. So it does appear that, you know, we're eventually going to get a Spanish language broadcasting service here in Jacksonville. I know the First Coast News, on their website, they have a Spanish section. But I think it is extremely, extremely necessary, obviously valuable, but extremely necessary to have a source of information for the Spanish-speaking community to be well-informed. They're members of our community, and it's important for them to know what's going on in their community too. So I'm really looking forward to that. I hope it continues to grow.
How does the community advocate for that, you think?
You know, I think the numbers speak volumes, and I think that's why a TV group like Cox Media Group is investing in bringing Telemundo here, because the numbers don't lie. And just anecdotally, we're seeing, you know, Latin businesses popping up, and like almost every neighborhood. That just goes to show you there's a market there, and that we need to we need to address. We cannot ignore them. They're here, they're part of our community, and they need to be informed of what's going on. So I think it really, the news stations are looking at the numbers and, you know, kind of looking at how they can get into that realm, and you know, Latino culture really values news programming. I grew up watching news. It was an event at my household to sit in front of the 6 o'clock newscast to watch the news. So I think that even though, you know, news watching in a lot of demographics is declining, I think the Latino and Hispanic culture, we're still avid news watchers. And TV stations and media groups are noticing that. So I'm glad that we're getting something in Jacksonville.
Do you use dual language in your work now? The county? A
little bit, but not a lot right now, but that is coming. We're going to be working through making sure that we're posting in Spanish and English soon, because the numbers from the census revealed that the Hispanic population in St. Johns County is growing tremendously. So we definitely need to be thinking about that. And I've been talking about it to my peers and colleagues about that. That's something that's coming down the pike.
Do you think the communications industry as a whole is missing resources for the community?
You know, that's a great question. I think that a lot of organizations don't know the value of their communications department. And I think and that's part of my job. Is half the battle is making sure people are aware that this is why we are a valuable team. And not that they don't know that, I just think a lot of times they don't maybe think about it, you know, because they're obviously, other departments have their work that they're doing and they're focused on that. But I think it's important to always have that public voice when you're trying to come up with strategy for the community.
When, for students who are looking to pursue perhaps the line of work that you're doing right now, what are some of the skills that they should be focusing on, and how can they set themselves apart? When a resume comes across your desk, what are you looking for?
Oh, okay. For the public affairs section?
For the public affairs section, or just communications in general?
Absolutely. Well, I always look for what experience do they have when it comes to writing press releases, when it comes to communicating a message, something that they can show me that they are strong communicators. Because it's not enough to just, you know, be a strong writer, even though that's important, but how can you express yourself in a conversational way that people understand?
And things like that. But this dude put on a suit, he went somewhere where he knew people were, followed people to,
you know, leave the jargon off the page and speak to me like a real person. And we learned that in news. I mean, we were always told, you know, very conversational, we're the real people. And that's who we're communicating to. So I really try to see that candidates have an understanding of that, especially during the interview, more than anything. And just really seeing like what experience they have in that world. Doesn't necessarily mean that they have to work in PR for them to be a good communicator, but I really try to hone in on that during the interview more than anything.
If a student or someone in the industry is specifically focused on one career, what's your guidance and advice for them?
Well, if they really have a passion for something and they know that that's what they want to do, I don't see anything wrong with that at all. I guess you know, even in my case, I didn't really have like a fallback career. I just really wanted to do journalism, and that's what I worked towards. So I don't think it's necessarily a bad thing if they're just focused on one type of career, but I think they should really think about how that can translate to different organizations or different businesses, and how they can use their skills in a diverse way, because that's what's going to help them be marketable.
And the communications industry is interesting now because you can really use these skills in any other industry as well. I mean, every company, every organization is hiring folks from the communications industry and students from the communications industry to come in and help them share their message.
And social media is a big thing now too. Actually, I'm hiring a social media professional for my team, and it's become its own full-time job. Social media really is, and reading the analytics and the data and all that stuff, it's kind of, there's like a science behind it too. So absolutely, every business, it doesn't matter what business it is, you need to have a strong communicator on your team. It's so important to be able to share the message of your company or your organization, your nonprofit, your government organization, and being able to do it effectively and conversationally, that's a skill.
Yeah. Let's go back to just you personally. Tell me someone that's been a true influence on you and what you learned from them.
My grandmother, for sure. Yes, I'm so passionate about my culture and my heritage thanks to her. She really instilled it in me, and you know, she was such a joy to be around, talk to. She was a natural storyteller, you know?
Yeah.
And I don't think she realized that she had a knack for storytelling. She would have been a great journalist. She loved reading, but I loved talking to her about her stories growing up, and she really had an impact on me in Latino culture and in other cultures too, but particularly in Latino culture. We grew up in multi-generational homes. So I grew up with my grandparents since I was 5. They lived in my same household. And so she was like a mom to me. I was blessed enough to have 2 moms. So definitely my grandma, my abuela.
And then on the professional side as well, is there one person that stands out to you?
Ooh, there's so many people I look up to in the news business. You know her, Tanika. She is not only a great friend, but a mentor, and I look up to her so much, and definitely one of those people who I know I can pick up the phone and I can sort of pick her brain about something that's been on my mind, or just get her advice, and it's always sound advice. So Tanika is definitely one of those people in the business who I look up to.
Yeah, and for those who aren't familiar with Tanika Hughes, she's a lead anchor for CBS47 and Fox 30 Action News Jax. She's been there for a number of years now.
Yes.
We're so happy to have her in the Jacksonville community. Any specific words of advice to people that are in the industry that might be looking to transition out and they're not sure what to do? Because I debated and debated and debated. Did you go through that same process?
I did. I was pretty torn. You know, because journalism, it will always be a passion for me. And do you agree?
Absolutely, 100%.
You will always be a journalist, no matter what you do. And so I struggled with, am I giving up on my dream? Am I giving up on what I really,
Yeah.
And I don't think, and I think I did myself a disservice by thinking that I was giving up, because I wasn't giving up on my dream. I was just, it's okay for your dream to look different.
Yes.
And it's okay for what you thought was a dream and a goal to look differently now. I mean, your goals and your priorities change.
Yeah.
And it just so happens, this is a funny story, The Rock, who we all know, famous actor, Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson tweeted something similar the other day, during the Super Bowl. He was, I don't know if you saw the Super Bowl this year, where he was sort of the presenter on the field. He always wanted to be in the NFL, and he didn't get a chance to because he got injured. So the NFL asked him to be the person who introduces the game, right, and kind of kicks it off. And he tweeted that, my life came full circle. I wanted to be in the NFL, but I wasn't. But here I am on the biggest stage of the NFL and this famous actor.
Yeah.
So I retweeted his tweet and I said, this gives me hope, because your dreams could look different now. He responded to me.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. I don't know if it was his marketing manager, but
Sure.
I like to think it was him.
Yeah.
And it's absolutely true. I mean, he's somebody like as famous and as wealthy and well-known as Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson, has something super relatable, that it's okay that your dream changes. And that's what I think I finally realized, that I'm still doing what I love, just in a different way.
Sure. And you're able to stay connected within the industry through the
Yes.
Jacksonville Broadcasters Association.
Yes.
Tell me what your thoughts about this association and how you'd like to see it grow in the future.
Oh, I'm so happy that this is here in Jacksonville, because we have a lot of talent come through this market and maybe make it on to the next phase of their career, and even make it on national networks and everything. And here's where they got their training. So it's so great to have an organization that celebrates that, and also records the history of all the communicators and journalists that came through this market.
Yeah.
And I hope we continue to grow it, and I hope we bring some of the younger people into the fold and continue to evolve.
I do as well. Any last advice or guidance or things that you want to share with the community that I might not have asked you? Your life has come full circle, would you say, looking back now? Tell me your thoughts on that.
Absolutely. I think everything that we do in our life kind of leads you to where you are currently.
Yeah.
And whether it's, things that you did right, things that you made a mistake on, all of that is valuable to where you are now. So I think, I was meant to come to Jacksonville, and I always say that Jacksonville is where I learned to be a polished and true professional journalist. Because in my other shops, that's you kind of starting off in the business and kind of learning the ropes and everything. But once I got here, is I applied everything I learned from my previous markets, and here's where I really became a confident journalist.
Wonderful. Well, we hope that you stay in Jacksonville for
Thank
many more
you.
years to
Me
come. And it's
too.
been a pleasure to be your friend and your coworker for so many years. Thanks for being with us today, Lorena.
Likewise, Amanda. Thank you.
All right. That's it for another episode of Oral History, sponsored by the Jacksonville Broadcasters Association. You can look for more videos on our website, and be sure to follow us on social media as well.